last night, but we took some ridiculous risks. Dwight Powell, first team basket. It was just that one. Okay. I wasted your money and I apologize for that. Of course, you don't get that often. All right. You're not going to find that level of transparency, this level of deep apology. Isn't that what you want? Isn't that why you watch that idiot kid from the FTX collapse? Just to see him tell you on the screen, I'm sorry. Look, if you could accept his apology, sure as hell can accept mine after what happened. It was a 2-3 night. It wasn't horrific, right? But at the same time, the Spencer Dinwiddie one killed me. All right. So just know that whatever you lost on the Dwight Powell, which you should only put a sprinkle on a first team basket anyway, first team, not total. Look, Spencer Dinwiddie, I lost bad on that one. So altogether, we sucked, and it sucked to get a 2-3 night, but we're back. 5 bets, 5 minutes. So I need you to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe. The clock is already begun, my friends. And let us begin with my squad. We're going to go out west, Midwest, not even technically, but we're going to go to Memphis. The western side of the state is what I meant, truly. The western side of Tennessee. And find the Philadelphia 76ers getting 5.5 points. Look, I don't think this is accurate. I actually think the Sixers have a decent chance of winning this. That's why you're not getting a ton back here on this money line at BetMGM. But the reality is Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris out or not, doesn't make or break any spread for me because Harris fully healthy can disappear, and Harris in 18, 19 minutes can get you 25 points. The volatility and variance of him does not impact me either way. This is one of the best defensive teams, especially on the perimeter. Joel Embiid back makes them a tough out inside. I like them hanging with 5.5 points. Absolutely. That's where we begin. All right. The next play is just going to be money line opportunity here. And that's the Brooklyn Nets, who are on a little bit of a roll right now. They've got a winning record. They're starting to feel themselves out there. Up in BK, where I am up, where you may be down, like in Toronto, down. But this is where I think you're starting to see Kevin Durant pull away, and they are definitely aware. They're cognizant. And that's when you start to look at early starts of the season up to December. You know, is there anything extra that's motivating a basketball team in the middle or end of the week? And in this case, I think the Brooklyn Nets figured out, all right, we've got over this early hump here. The Toronto Raptors are not coming in as an easy out either, and they're a little bit lacking somewhat in depth where you're not going to see, look, Otto Porter we knew, but Precious. The reality, though, is that even healthy now, I don't think the Toronto Raptors have figured out their issues. That's the bigger difference for me. That's why we go Nets on the money line. All right, let's go out now, a little bit later, west to Utah. This is a team in the Pacers who have found a way to hang, and that's what they do. They hang in these games. They score a shit ton of points in these games, and the Pacers are a good basketball team with a 5-5 road record, granted, but still much better than the product that we're used to out of this squad, and that they can stretch the floor and have multiple guys at different positions be a threat from three. Tyrese Halliburton is doing a fantastic job with facilitation involved and picking up ends here. This is a team defensively that is probably not going to put the clamps on you, but they frustrate teams and they score. And that's what's been a really difficult thing to stop Indiana, has been limiting their offensive production on the road. Yeah, I get it. They're 5-5.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Stokastic NBA Strategy Show. We are sponsored by Prize Picks today, and 11-game NBA slate, much better than last night's weird 1-game NBA slate. The NBA schedule, not our friend right now, but 11-game slate. This is a much better scenario. As you guys come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Adam, how are you doing this morning?
Doing pretty well. Looking forward to an actual basketball slate because I played really poorly on Wednesday. I kind of made some adjustments and went too far in the contrarian direction. So I really wanted to get back to playing. And then we got the one gamer yesterday. So yeah, I'm excited to have a real slate.
Yeah, so 11 games, and we will jump right into it now, starting with the Washington Wizards, your team, Adam, going up against the Charlotte Hornets. Now, from Washington, we've got some injury news, nothing too significant. Rui Hachimura is out, and that's going to make, some minutes available in the front court, but not enough to make anybody playable in terms of just his absence. Then on the high end, we've got Bradley Beal, Kyle Kuzma, Kristaps Porzingis. It's a good matchup against Charlotte. It's really hard for me to find anything I really like in terms of points per dollar value, though.
Yeah, that's been the case for me with the Wizards pretty much all season long whenever they're healthy. Bradley Beal's taken a step back in terms of his fantasy production because they're not running the offense through him quite as much. He's taking on a bigger playmaking role. So at 8,400, getting 36 to 38 minutes, clearly he can have good games, but it's a big enough slate that there's just going to be options that project better. Porzingis has played really, really, really well. He's 8,700 center only on DraftKings. The opportunity cost there makes it really difficult, I think, to prioritize him, but you do still get that really high ceiling from him. We've seen his playing time ramping up as well. For a lot of the season, he's been playing 30 to 32 minutes, but recently in competitive games when he's not in foul trouble, you've gotten more than that. Last game, he played 37 and a half against Brooklyn. So I think if I get to one piece from the Wizards, it's likely to be Porzingis, but with everybody healthy, Kuzma, Porzingis, Beal, they're all fine, but they just eat into each other enough where it's tough to really want to get to them.
Yeah, and something else interesting to add about this slate and how stuff is going to change as we get later on in the day. So, watch the deeper dive and live before lock is that there's no real chalk on DraftKings today. The most popular player is Colin Sexton. He's 25%. And we got Zach Collins around 25% as well. FanDuel, there are some players who are just mispriced. So you get Cam Payne, who's projected for about 40% ownership. But by and large part, there isn't a ton of really cheap guys that, at least as of right now, are smash type plays. So that's going to be interesting when we build lineups later on the day, is that there is just no real chalk. And there are a lot of teams that just kind of look like Washington right now, where there are no real injuries or pricing value. And, we might have somebody like a Rui Hachimura out, but I don't really think that makes any difference, at least as far as DFS goes. Are there any cheaper Washington guys that you like to get to because Rui isn't going to be active?
No, I don't think he really matters too much from a fantasy standpoint. As far as cheaper guys on Washington, if you want to hope you get some production from a $4,500 Monte Morris, you should get around 28 minutes there, but it's not like it's a guy you're going to feel confident in. And if any value does open up, the interest level on him is really going to disappear. One other thing on Porzingis, because I just hadn't looked in a while, so I was curious, but he's played 16 games with Beal now this season. He's still averaged 1.3 DraftKings points per minute and 32.4 minutes per game. So, obviously he's gets even more opportunities when Beal's out, but we've really seen him step up even with Beal in.
Yeah, he's been really good. And the key for Porzingis is he's healthy. It's the start of the year. When you catch Porzingis healthy, he's always been a good fantasy producer. I know he had that 1 year, well, actually, it was the start of last year where he kind of struggled alongside Luka. But yeah, this year he's been an elite fantasy producer, and he's back to being that guy that he was in New York when he was an all-star caliber player. And will he be an all-star this year? Probably should be. It's just hard because I feel like there's 40 all-star caliber NBA players now. Right. And did you see the thing where there was actually a petition to try to expand the all-star rosters because of how much talent there is in the NBA? And the owners shot it down because there are provisions in players' contracts where they get paid extra if they make the all-star game. So owners were not willing to go there. But Porzingis is certainly all-star caliber. Let's hit on the other side of this game with the Charlotte Hornets. And the backcourt situation continues to be a mess for this team. LaMelo Ball is out. Dennis Smith Jr. is out. Gordon Hayward, he remains out for an extended period of time, kind of the status quo for Gordon Hayward at this point in his career. Terry Rozier is back, though. Missed last game with an illness. He is going to return. How appealing is he as an option with all of the other guys who would have normally expected to produce for the Hornets out of the picture?
I think it makes him look pretty good. I mean, you're going to get a lot of opportunities for him. He's going to have the ball a ton. The offense is going to run through him. We have him projected for 15% ownership with a 12% chance of being optimal. I think that makes sense. Shooting guard, small forward on DraftKings is nice. $7,600 is reasonable. Trying to quickly pull up his rates without these guys on the floor, but that he's just going to be a productive option in this situation.
Yeah, and he's a little bit more expensive than we would typically see from Terry Rozier, but I mean the 7,400 price tag that we have him on FanDuel, 76 on DraftKings. I still think there's upside there just because there's so many players out for the Hornets that the usage is going to have to go somewhere, and it's mostly going to be towards Terry Rozier.
0.98 DraftKings points per minute this year without Hayward or Ball on the floor, but that's on 47.1% true shooting. He has a 29.5% usage rate, 21.7% assist percentage. So the opportunities are clearly there. And if he's going to play around 36 minutes, even if he does just average a fantasy point per minute, that's a decent projection. But also that production should come up over a larger sample, assuming that he starts to knock down more shots.
And then as for the rest of the players on the team, we got Kelly Oubre, PJ Washington, different guys who I think we could reasonably say should see more usage considering all the players out for Charlotte. But relative to their price tags, does it make any of them strong options?
I think PJ Washington is really interesting at 5,500. He's getting 18% ownership, and he only played like 26 minutes last game, but that was a massive blowout against Boston. He didn't play at all in the fourth quarter. We've seen really steady playing time from PJ Washington recently, as long as he's not in foul trouble. And with this team being shorthanded, there's no reason to think that's going to change here. So PJ Washington this year, 338 minutes without LaMelo or Hayward on the floor, 0.88 DraftKings points per minute, 23% usage rate. At 5,500, assuming he's going to play around 34 minutes, I think that makes him look pretty good. Mason Plumlee, I think, is a bit underpriced at 5,300. He has averaged a little over a fantasy point per minute without those guys on the floor. He's likely to give you around 30 minutes, so that's another spot where he's just going to project pretty well. Kelly Oubre looks perfectly fine as well. He's played 342 minutes, 1.05 DraftKings points per minute, 28.2% usage rate. It really should be him and Rozier as far as the most aggressive players on the offensive end. So I think there's just a lot to get to from the Charlotte side.
Yeah, I mean, that'll happen when there's a lot of players out. And at least as of now, not too many players that have been ruled out, especially for an 11-game slate. Now, the next game we have, it is the Toronto Raptors against the Brooklyn Nets. And the Raptors, the opposite of players getting ruled out. They had a bunch of guys ruled out who are now back in the mix. So we've not seen a fully healthy Raptors roster very frequently this year. We've got it right now. Siakam, Van Vliet, Barnes, Anunoby, and Chris Boucher also back now. These guys are all good to go. The only player who's out is Otto Porter Jr., but he was playing kind of a minimized role off the bench as of late anyway. With everybody healthy for the Raptors, does anything really stand out as somebody to pay up for? Because a lot of these guys are fairly expensive now.
Yeah, I don't think anything really stands out. The Pascal Siakam spot is interesting to me. He played 34 minutes last game, lost 2.5 to 3 minutes to garbage time. So it looks like they were going to be pretty comfortable getting him back to like 36 minutes. I think there's a chance that you just see him get back to his normal like 38 to 39 today. And he has been extremely good this year. I know he was out for a while, so maybe people have sort of forgotten about it, but Siakam really took over as far as just running this entire offense. He's averaged 1.37 DraftKings points per minute this year. Usage rate is just north of 30%. Assist percentage is 33.5%. So I do think it's kind of interesting. Like, he got power forward eligibility back on DraftKings as well, so you don't have that same opportunity cost as when he was center only. His actual cost has come down a little bit as well to 9,300. I think it's kind of interesting to get the Siakam here and just hope that you time it right where, he gets a few extra minutes at the same time that you play him at a reduced price tag and before the field sort of catches up.
Yeah, and something else with Siakam and how good he's been this year, it's easy to forget, but Fred VanVleet was playing a pretty minimized role in the first couple weeks of the season because Siakam is doing everything for this team. Siakam could actually, I think I would even expect him to lead this team in scoring, rebounds, and assists. And maybe you might be thinking like, oh, assists for Pascal Siakam. Well, he's averaging over 7 assists per game this year. VanVleet is at 6.5. He's really the engine of this team and does everything for them. So I agree with you. If I had to play one Raptors guy, if I absolutely had to, it would be Siakam, and it wouldn't really be too much of a decision.
Yeah, in the 8 games that Siakam and VanVleet have played together this year, like you said, Siakam's averaging 6.9 assists per game, 9 rebounds per game, 24 points per game, 29.8% usage rate, 34% assist percentage, 14% rebounding percentage. Again, like, I don't think I'm not like super confident that he just goes and plays 38, 39 minutes and smashes tonight, but it does sort of, everything's kind of coming together where it's like, all right, you're getting the dropping price tag. The ownership's not there yet. He's easier to get into lineups now because of MPE. I like the idea in large field tournaments of getting to Siakam and just hoping that he's going to have that game either today, next game, the game after that. It's coming soon. Hopefully it's today at low ownership.
Yeah, and one thing that at least does help him a little bit, Ben Simmons is out for the Nets on the other side of the game. Simmons was finally starting to play well and then finds himself hurt again. He's dealing with a little bit of everything. I've seen it listed as calf, back, knee, but with Ben Simmons out of the picture, what does that mean for Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving?
I think it's a bump for both of them. Irving in particular, we've seen his usage rate going back to last year when he plays with Durant and without Simmons and Harden. We see Irving's usage rate come up. We also see his assist opportunities come up. Durant's 11K, so he's in a spot where, like, clearly if you get to him, great. But Durant's still priced up a bit from Kyrie being out. So Simmons being out doesn't really do enough to make Durant stand out. I am really interested in Kyrie, though. 8% ownership. I liked him a lot last game, and he didn't really have a good game. But I don't think it should be ignored that he took a ton of shots. Like, he just shot really poorly. He played like shit. You can't really do anything about that. But just from an opportunity standpoint, he got a lot of them. Now he's even cheaper than he was in that game. He played 38 minutes. So again, we have Kyrie back to playing 38, 39 minutes. I think Kyrie looks really good at this price tag and modest ownership.
And the other thing too about last game, it's not like he was a disaster from a fantasy standpoint. He put up 42 fantasy points despite being really inefficient. But the key to what you said before, he did 32% usage rate. That was actually his highest mark since October 27th in a game against the Mavericks. And part of that is going to be with the absence of Ben Simmons. The ball's in Kyrie Irving's hands more. Now, Simmons himself isn't a high usage player, but the ball does end up in his hands a lot. And when the ball's in Kyrie's hands, there's a good chance he's going to end up shooting more. So I agree with you. And he's 8,200, 8,100 across DraftKings and FanDuel. This is a really cheap price for Kyrie. I just can't imagine it's going to get lower than this going forward. So I'm with you. I like getting to Kyrie. I think it's a good buy low spot. Durant a little bit too pricey for me. As for the role players on the team, TJ Warren, he's going to be playing for the first time in pretty much forever. The last time we really saw TJ Warren was when he was just destroying everybody in the bubble. That's how long it's been.
Including my bankroll.
Yeah. TJ Warren, who, I mean, we're going way back now, but TJ Warren was like 8,000 and was massively popular on every single slate, and they would shoot 90% from the field. Just went on one of the dumbest heaters of all time. But him being back in the mix, the absence of Ben Simmons, do any role players stand out for the Nets?
So the impact of TJ Warren, obviously we don't know exactly how that's going to look. He hasn't played in a couple of years. I'm not expecting him to play a lot. He does just sort of make things, I guess, a little bit riskier for some of the role guys. But Joe Harris did start in place of Simmons last game. He played 37 minutes. I think you can project like 32-ish. And then, obviously if he plays more, that's great. He's only 4K. He has shot really poorly this year. I know you and I talked about it the other day. More likely than not, he's going to start shooting better, even if he doesn't get all the way back to what he was prior to his injury. And there's no reason that he necessarily won't. But even if he doesn't get all the way back to there, he's going to be better than the worst shooter on the Nets, or he's going to simply stop playing minutes. So I think that there is still some value there. We have him getting 17% ownership because, like you said, right now, we don't have a ton of value options elsewhere that look better. He is somebody that I would expect to drop off in terms of ownership a bit if and when we start getting guys ruled out later today. But he looks like a good point per dollar projection. Royce O'Neal at 5,600 should play a lot of minutes. Played 39 last game. You're likely to get 37, 38 in any given game. So both of those guys sort of just stand out as reasonable values where they might drop off a little bit as other stuff opens up, but they look pretty good. And then Nick Claxton at 6K. He was disappointing last game. He was really popular, but he still played 28 minutes. I think typically you're going to get even more than that from him. Dealt with some foul trouble in that game. So I like getting back to Claxton at 6K as well.
Anybody else you want to talk about from the Nets?
No.
All right. If you guys have not signed up at BetMGM yet, you are missing out on an opportunity to make the easiest $200 you are ever going to make. Because all you need to do to get $200 from BetMGM is make a new account. Click on the link that we have below. It's in the description box, but also Mike will be throwing it into the YouTube chat. You click on that link and you head on over to BetMGM. And when your first bet is a $10 money line bet on the World Cup, you're going to win $200 regardless of the results of that game. So the way the deal works is as long as there's a goal scored, and that means in any World Cup game, since there's already been a goal scored, you guys are making $200. All you have to do is sign up by clicking our link and then place a $10 money line bet on any World Cup soccer game. It is that easy. And the deal ends this Sunday. So if you've not taken advantage, do it now because there's only a couple days left to collect that money. Next game we have here, it is the Miami Heat against the Boston Celtics. The Miami Heat injury report, the usual nonsense. Jimmy Butler has been upgraded to questionable after missing the last handful of games. And then beyond him, we have Dwayne Dedmon is questionable. Nikola Jovic is questionable. Players listed as probable just for fun. Tyler Hero, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Duncan Robinson, and Haywood Highsmith. What would the return of Jimmy Butler do to guys like Bam Adebayo, Kyle Lowry, Tyler Hero?
it just makes them all look a little bit less productive. And normally that would be a big deal because you'd see them priced up. But weirdly, Bam Adebayo's price tag has come down to 8,100. Hero's still just sitting at 7,300. Lowry's at 7K. So if Butler's back, I don't think any of those guys look particularly good, but they are still at least playable if you just get to them in lineups here and there. It's not like they're wildly overpriced like you would expect them to be by this point. But if Butler's out, they're still just going to look better because you're getting more opportunities for all of them.
Yeah, and I assume that I think Butler's probably getting closer to playing as my browser crashes and all my data goes away. But my assumption is going to be that Butler plays, and we've not seen the Heat all healthy for quite a long time now. It's been guys constantly in and out. If he's back, I just think this is a team I'm hardly going to get any exposure to, just because there's going to be so many better value spots. But anything particular that would stand out to you for Miami if Butler does not play?
Not really. I mean, if he doesn't play, it's just going to make all of Lowry, Hero, Bam look better. You can expect more playing time for Martin, but he's priced up enough where he's not really going to look good anyway. So right now we have basically no ownership coming into this team. We have 3% coming to Bam, and then everyone else sub 1%. I think if Butler's back, it probably starts to look more like 5 to 8% coming to Bam, 5% coming to Hero, a little bit coming to Lowry, but they still won't be guys that you're building around, but you're just going to get to them more if Butler's out because there is increased opportunities.
And they're taking on the Boston Celtics, who are just by a mile the best team in the NBA right now. And Jason Tatum, now the betting favorite to win MVP this year. And this is definitely a little bit driven by the narrative of how good the Boston Celtics are and that there just isn't one real runaway candidate right now. But nobody on the injury report for the Celtics. Robert Williams, he appears to be nearing a return, but at least for now is still out for a couple weeks. Anything that really stands out to you from the Celtics? I love Tatum, but he is really expensive now.
Yeah, I mean, Tatum's just at a point where I'm not going to get to him frequently at that salary. And if he's just going to continue to go out there and drop 60 and 70 fantasy point games, it's going to be a rough couple of weeks for me. But it's just like, even as good as he's been this year, he's averaging 1.46 DraftKings points per minute. He has a 32% usage rate, 18% assist percentage. He's been really, really good. But if you use those numbers, he doesn't look like that good of a play at $10,900. So it's a case where, yeah, he's really good and he's going to go have some monster games. But if we're just going to see him somehow, you see it with a bunch of guys throughout the course of a season. It would be it feels like they're just magically outperforming what their numbers actually are. He's at 1.46 DraftKings points per minute, but it just feels like he scores 1.6 every day. If that continues for the next couple of weeks, it's just going to suck for me. But it's really tough to get to him at 10.9. It's just a really, really aggressive price tag. He's $100 less than Kevin Durant. I think that they are pretty comparable, but I'm just typically end up going to cheaper guys, including Jaylen Brown, who's only $8,000, 11% ownership. He's also been good this year, 1.18 DraftKings points per minute, has a usage rate just north of 30%. I think that gap is just way too big in salary between those guys.
Yeah, Tatum 10.8 on DK, 10.9 on FanDuel. It's a really expensive price tag. There's other guys at this point I'd prefer to pay up for, and it's not because Tatum isn't good. He's fantastic. He's one of the best players in the NBA. He's the betting favorite to win MVP, but he's just not the same caliber of fantasy producer as somebody like a Giannis or a Nikola Jokic, and that's kind of where he's priced now. So it's just going to be hard for me to get there. And there's
the pretty crazy thing. Sorry, the pretty crazy thing the other day too. He went for 76 points. He wasn't even in the winning lineup.
I'm trying to remember what that. Well, also he's been really low owned in a lot of these spots. But yeah, 76, and that's in that game against Miami. Who was the pay up option that was optimal that day? Do you remember?
Jesse had Booker. He had Ayton. Booker scored 69. Tatum was probably in the optimal lineup. But I just is to reiterate, to your point, he's low owned, so it's kind of just reiterating it for myself to get over the fear of missing out, because I'm tired of being burned by massive Jason Tatum games. But if he's going to be 1-2% owned, obviously if he scores 76, you'd love to have a bunch of him, but it also at that price point, there's ways to win even if he does go off and you don't have him.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. And we're about to talk about the Lakers Milwaukee game, so I get tied into this. But it's the reason why, the one game slates notwithstanding, we haven't seen as much of guys like Giannis, Luka be optimal this year, because there are so many really good high upside players in the NBA, like Devin Booker, for instance, who's dropping also some games where he goes off for 70 fantasy points. He's just doing it at a lower price point than the really high end price players. So it's we've gotten to a point where, I mean, how many guys in the league now are capable of within realistic expectations scoring, 60 fantasy points on any given night? It's a shit ton of guys now.
Yeah, it really is. It's a combination of just a lot of really, really good players, but also every team or most teams are just playing so fast now that you just get those opportunities for more guys as well.
All right, let's talk about the Lakers Milwaukee Bucks game now. And on the Lakers side, LeBron's healthy, Anthony Davis is healthy, but Dennis Schroeder is questionable. He's dealing with a personal issue. And then we've also got Lonnie Walker. He's questionable. He's dealing with a foot injury. He missed the last game for the Lakers. So starting with Schroeder and Lonnie Walker, if these guys are ruled out, are there any value plays that come into play for the Lakers?
Maybe. I mean, probably not that I'm going to really build around, because you just start talking about other shitty players that step up. Austin Reeves played really well in 35 minutes in his start the other day. Troy Brown was out. Lonnie Walker was out. You can't expect Austin Reeves to do that again. The opportunities will be there for him, from a playing time standpoint. But 4,200 if he's starting and you want to gamble on him, sure. Just, keep your expectations in check. He's a 0.68 DraftKings point per minute guy for the season. So don't get too caught up in, what he happened to do last game. Similarly, if Schroeder, if all those guys end up being out, you could get more minutes for Patrick Beverley. What he does with those minutes, who knows? Also, he doesn't have to get those minutes because he does foul a lot. And also, he's just been awful this year. 39% true shooting percentage. Again, has to come up, but 377 minutes, 39% true shooting, just absolutely awful. 9% usage rate this year. You could get more minutes for none potentially if Schroeder is out. But again, I just doubt that you're getting enough minutes where you really want to get there. Maybe Westbrook plays more, but then at the same time, he only played 23 minutes last game with this team being shorthanded. If you take out Schroeder, it's more likely, I think, that Westbrook gets more minutes. But I still just, assuming LeBron and Davis both play, I still don't think there's going to be much that I want to get to from this team.
They've just been a disaster. Every single role player that the Lakers have signed the last few years, they just go here to die. Patrick Beverley is, I just pulled up dunks and threes, 30 PM stats. He's an 8th percentile player on offense this year. And this should be a good spot for him on paper. Actually, when the Lakers traded for Beverley, I thought it made sense. Somebody who competes defensively and on offense. The one thing he has at least been able to do the last few years is knock down open shots. For whatever reason, nobody makes threes once they put on the Lakers jersey. It's the opposite of a magical jersey. Players just cannot shoot on this team for whatever reason.
Beverley was like the only move the Lakers have made in the last 3 years that I actually thought made sense.
And it's worked out terribly.
Right.
It's been an absolute disaster. And it did seem to make sense on paper. Now, the fit with him and Westbrook was certainly a weird one, but I thought that, all right, we're getting a guy who could defend and shoot. And now it just turns out he can't do any of those things with the Lakers.
Nice open field tackle on DeAndre Ayton, though.
Yeah, that's true, which is something that was celebrated by Lakers Twitter because things are going so poorly for them that they're like, oh, this is the high point of our season. This is
right.
This is where stuff comes together.
Patrick Beverley not being allowed to play for 3 games, reason for celebration.
Yeah, and what did they do in those games? They ended up going. Hey, they went 2-1. Oh no, I'm looking at 2-1 in those games. So,
yeah.
All right,
I know they beat the Blazers with Beverley back because I just kept firing live bets on the Blazers and they kept missing shots.
Well, part of it also is they played the Spurs twice, which will definitely help. So actually, the strength of schedule is pretty easy. They played the Spurs twice and the Pacers at home. They lost the Pacers at home. So maybe below expectations in those spots. But
where do people get this shit from? LeBron has been incredibly bad all season. No, he hasn't.
He's relative to LeBron expectations.
Sure, but incredibly bad to me implies he's not playing well.
Yeah, it's always weird when, because so many times you're comparing players relative to what your expectations, and the baseline for LeBron is basically best player in the NBA, which he's clearly not anymore.
Sure,
right?
He's 40 years old.
Yeah, there's a bunch of guys that are ahead of him, but still, if you go to dunks and threes once again and look at the EPM numbers, he's 91st percentile overall in EPM, and he's 88th percentile in wins added. Now, is that the same LeBron from previous years? No, and it shouldn't be expected to, it being really old and injuries mounting, but he's still a good player. Now, as far as a pay-up option goes, I don't really have interest in him in this spot. If I'm paying up for AD or LeBron, I prefer AD, but neither of them are priorities.
Yeah, same here. I mean, when they're both active, it's just tough to get there because they cut into each other enough. Overall this year, 1.4 DraftKings points per minute for LeBron, 1.5 for Davis. Some of that is skewed by the games that LeBron missed and vice versa. But yeah, they're both just obviously they're capable of having big games, but it's just not going to happen for me if they're both in. Certainly happy to play whichever one is in when the other is out, but as long as they're priced up with both of them in, I'm good.
And then as for the other side of the game, we talk about the Milwaukee Bucks. It's kind of the same scenario for me where unless a ton of value opens up, it is just hard to get to Giannis right now. He's really expensive. And also we've seen a little bit of a step back in terms of his points per dollar, points per minute rates this year. And Chris Middleton's back. I'm not exactly sure what we could expect from Chris Middleton his first game of the season, but the time he's on the court, it's going to take away usage from Giannis and Drew.
Yeah, I think so. We already had this situation where, Giannis was really expensive and tough to get to. Now you throw Chris Middleton into the mix, and obviously Giannis is still the alpha here and everything's going to go through him, but you're still adding a high usage player that is going to cut into Giannis's production at least a bit. Same goes for Drew Holiday. I liked him a lot last game. He's been averaging about 1.2 DraftKings points per minute this year, but throwing Middleton back in there is going to knock those rates down. The salary is slowly climbing. He's still getting 6% ownership on DraftKings, and I do think that's fine just because without Middleton, I think Drew is like an $8,500 player, 8K to 8,500. So like he'd still be a little bit underpriced here. So I think it's fair to say that he's just like correctly priced with Middleton back. And if he lands in lineups here and there, it's fine. But if Middleton were out today, I would be going right back to saying like play a lot of Drew. But with Middleton back, it's more so just play whatever Drew you get to. And I don't really care if I don't get any. I don't really care if I get 2x the field. It's just like not going to be a huge priority for me.
And then as a pay up option, Giannis, just kind of similar thoughts to Drew with Middleton being back. If you got to him in a couple lineups, okay, but also not going to be making it any kind of priority to play Giannis.
Yeah, and it's even tougher than Drew because like even if Middleton were out, it would be really tough to play Giannis just because of that price tag. We talked about how tough it is to get to Tatum or Durant or LeBron or Davis, and they're all like $1,000 plus less expensive than Giannis. So unless a lot of value opens up, it's tough to get there.
Denver Nuggets taking on the Atlanta Hawks. In our next game, we got the Nuggets as slight favorites on the road, 2.5 points, fairly high total, 232.5, one of the higher marks on the slate. Now for the Nuggets, once again, there's going to be no Michael Porter Jr. He's been injured for a while now. And then we've got Jeff Green. He is doubtful to play. I've really liked Jamal Murray as of late. It looks like he's back to being the guy he was a couple of years ago. The minutes have gone up. The usage is also up. So if we look at Jamal Murray in the last handful of games, and I think he is somebody who we really have to take some more of the recent games more than some of the games at the beginning of the year, just because at the beginning of the year, he's coming back from a long layoff. The minutes are limited. Now, the only thing that's actually hurt him in recent games is that the fact that Denver is playing so well that they're just destroying teams. But in the games that have been close, we're seeing upwards of 34 to 36 minutes for Murray. His usage rate also has been anywhere from like 26 to 35%. So Jamal Murray, I think he's back to whatever you guys thought of him a couple of years ago. I think he's that guy again, and I like playing Murray in tournaments.
Yeah, I really like this price tag on him at 7,100. I think it looks really good. To your point, he played like 31 minutes last game, but that game also ended up being a blowout. He's probable tonight, so there's no reason to think he's not going to be good to go. I'm with you. I like getting the Murray. He's also not getting ownership right now, 3%. And it seems like he's just getting slept on in general. I know the other day he was like 6% owned, and it was a slate where there were a lot of good plays, but it was just like a bunch of guys around him. It was the slate where like Giddey was 53%, Drew was like 12, Murray at the same price was like 6. So it seems like he's just getting slept on a bit, and I really don't think that he should be.
No, I mean, you look at these games, 36 fantasy points, 46, 45, and all these were blowouts. These were all games that were decided by double digits. Now, he still ended up playing 33.5 minutes in the Clippers game, but once again, didn't finish the game, could have played more. The usage is up, the assist rate is up. So I think Jamal Murray is one of the better contrarian plays that we have right now. Nikola Jokic as a pay-up option, how does he rate out for you relative to other pay-up options? He's somebody that you're going to try to prioritize rostering.
Rinse and repeat, Jason Tatum, Giannis, Durant, LeBron, Davis. Like, obviously, I'm happy to get to Jokic, but there's just the opportunity cost is really high. The actual cost is really high. It's just not probably not going to happen. Like I can go to, I mean, the immediate one that I think of out of guys we've already talked about, I can go to Kristaps Porzingis for almost $3,000 less and get a guy that averages 1.3 DraftKings points per minute instead of like 1.6. But then the other issue with Jokic, and this is in part because of what you said with Denver playing really well, but he's only averaging like 31 minutes per game this season. And part of that is because Denver, blows out teams often enough, but we've also sort of just seen them not go as crazy with Jokic's minutes. Even last game against Houston, he played 27 and a half minutes. He lost 3 minutes to garbage time, but if that game's competitive, he plays 31 or 32 minutes. So the playing time's been a bit of an issue for him, in addition to Jamal Murray cutting into his production. And then also there's the roster construction issue where it's really tough to pay all the way up at center unless you're getting an elite spot that stands out, which, with a relatively healthy Denver team, this isn't.
Any role players do you like from Denver?
Bruce Brown looks fine. He's the only guy here really getting ownership on DraftKings at 16%. KCP is getting 8% as well. That's very similar to Joe Harris, I think, where as value opens up, people are going to not care about KCP. But right now, with the lack of value, if you're going to get around 30 minutes from KCP at 4K, he's going to look fine. Bruce Brown's likely to play mid-30s. He's just a solid player, 0.9 DraftKings points per minute for the season. So I think Brown, probably the easiest guy on this team to get to, especially on DraftKings, point guard, small forward eligible. So really, really favorable positional eligibility as well.
And now if we talk about the Hawks side, a lot of injuries here. And we've got different ways because Clint Capella, he could be out. That would open up obvious value in Okongwu. We've also got Bogdanovich potentially returning, Jalen Johnson potentially returning as well. But I want to ask you about Clint Capella first, because to me, that's the most important injury that we have in this game. If he is out, do we just expect that Okongwu moves back in the starting lineup and plays the Clint Capella role, or would the return of Jalen Johnson or Bogdanovich change that at all?
No, I expect that you would get Okongwu back in the starting lineup if Capella misses.
All right, so Okongwu, let's see, what has he done in his starts this year? Off the top of my head, he's played pretty good minutes. Here it is. Okay, so
it's been like 30 plus, I think.
Yeah, 2 starts for Okongwu. He averaged 33 minutes in those games. Now, the points per minute production wasn't great. Averaged 22 fantasy points in those 33 minutes. I care way more about the 33 fantasy points. This is a guy who's been around a fantasy point per minute his entire career. If he starts and plays 30 minutes, you're projecting for around 30 fantasy points, and he's one of the better value plays on the slate. Now, I also want to ask you, as far as Trae Young and DeJounte Murray go, would the return of Bogdanovich hurt these guys at all?
Possibly, but it's another spot that's just like kind of difficult to quantify, I think. It's sort of like the TJ Warren spot. Obviously Bogdanovich hasn't been out that long, but I expect him to be somewhat limited. I assume they're going to bring him off the bench. So like you're going to, the issue is right now with the way Atlanta runs their rotation, you're getting a nice chunk of minutes, like 10 minutes a game for each guy, where Trae Young's playing without DeJounte Murray and DeJounte Murray's playing without Trae Young. Now I think in all those minutes, it's probably going to be Trae Young and Bogdanovich and DeJounte Murray and Bogdanovich. But we have also seen in the past that while Bogdanovich is a capable playmaker, he's a good NBA player, he can do a lot of things, he's perfectly fine just sort of playing second role. So I don't think that he's going to come in and just like take the ball away from Trae Young or take the ball away from DeJounte Murray. So I think he's fine being, a secondary piece and probably won't affect them that much, but it's probably a slightly negative impact. Anything
else you want to talk about from the Hawks?
If Capella plays, we have seen his playing time trend up. He played another like 20 minutes last game, or 29 minutes rather. He's 6,300. He also lost a minute and a half to garbage time. So I do think Capella in tournaments is kind of interesting if he plays. And then obviously Trae Young and DeJounte Murray look fine if you can get to them.
If you guys haven't done it yet, do us a favor, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Next game, the Orlando Magic against the Cleveland Cavaliers. And, it looked like the Magic starting to get guys healthy. The backcourt situation, it's a mess for the Magic. I think we could totally avoid the Markelle Fultz, Terrence Ross, Cole Anthony, all those guys back. It is really difficult to parse that situation. A lot of those guys on minutes limits also. But the front court has all of a sudden gotten thin just as the backcourt has gotten crowded because Wendell Carter Jr., he's out for the next few weeks. We've got Chuma Okeke, he is out, and Mo Bamba is questionable. If Bamba isn't able to play, what are we looking at in terms of value in the front court for the Magic? Because all of a sudden they would go from a lot of guys to very few pretty quickly.
Yeah, we've sort of seen it play out with Orlando where if everybody is in, they're not really really interesting. And by everybody, I mean, like, I'm excluding Wendell Carter and all of those guys. But if Bamba is out, that does open up some minutes. We saw him out last game, and we got a starting lineup with Bol, Banchero, Wagner, Fultz, and Gary Harris. Gary Harris out today as well. Kevon Harris started the second half last game. So this team's tough because, like, it's a mess. They have a lot of interchangeable pieces, but Banchero is still going to look reasonably good. He gets a bump in usage without Wendell Carter. You do have, with Anthony back and Fultz back, you do have a couple of high usage guys there. Banchero's price tags come down to 7,800. I played a lot of him the other day, which wasn't really intentional, but I don't like much from this team. I don't think Banchero's probably the only guy I could see getting to. Maybe Bamba if he starts at 5,800.
Do you think there's any chance we would see Mo Wagner move into the starting lineup if Bamba doesn't play?
I mean, you could. I don't think they will, just because that's not what they had done. He started the second half in place of him the other day, but then they started Caleb Houston with Bamba out, and then they started Fultz with him out.
All right, let's move on to Cleveland on the other side of the game. And for the Cavaliers, Jared Allen is out. Kevin Love is doubtful. We've seen Evan Mobley perform much better from a fantasy perspective with no Allen or Love in the mix. He's gotten to be a little bit more expensive, but is Mobley still somebody you'd be looking to get to tonight?
He does look better when he's playing center. So I think that with Allen out, there is still some interest there. Kevin Love doubtful as well. So you should be getting some center minutes. They started Diakite last game. I doubt he starts again today. He played 23 minutes, including garbage time. But I assume that they'll go back to Chetty or Okoro or one of the wings here against Orlando. Maybe they don't, but I kind of assumed that was just a Embiid thing. But one way or the other, I think that Mobley at 7K still looks pretty interesting. He's pulling 18% ownership. Rebounding rate goes up when he's playing center. Usage rate goes up a little bit. And he also should play a lot of minutes. So I think he looks pretty good. I think Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland both look good. Their salaries have come down to the mid 8K range. They're playing huge minutes. They do cut into each other a bit, but you're still talking about around 1.1-ish fantasy points per minute for Garland, 1.2 for Mitchell, playing a ton of minutes. So like both of them. And then the $4,700 price tag on LeVert should be coming off the bench, but also is likely to give you at least 30 minutes or so. I think that's a pretty interesting price tag as well.
And then anything else from the Cavs here? Garland, Mitchell, that's been a pretty complicated one to figure out. Lamar Stevens back in the picture. Any other Cavs players you think stand out as options?
It's pretty much Mitchell, Mobley, Garland, LeVert for me. If Wade is starting at 3,800 and no other value opens up, then sure, but there's probably going to be other value.
All right, let's move on to the Philadelphia 76ers against the Memphis Grizzlies as it stands now. Grizzlies favored by 5 points and only a 217 total, which is the second lowest on the slate. The only lower is the Orlando-Cleveland game we just talked about, and every other game on the slate has a total quite a bit higher than these two. Now, from the Philadelphia side of the game, Tobias Harris is questionable. So Harris has had to take on a bigger role as of late just because of all the players that are out for the 76ers. Maxey remains out. James Harden remains out, although Harden apparently nearing a return. If Harris is not able to play, how does it impact the other starters for the Sixers?
It should give a little bit more usage to Melton. I don't know that Embiid really can get more usage than he already does. But I don't think it's going to have too much of an impact just because we have seen Harris sort of take a step back this year in terms of his role. So I don't think it matters all that much outside of, like, it does open up more minutes, but those minutes are probably going to go to some combination of Korkmaz, Niang, House, not necessarily the most appealing fantasy options.
And then anything else that you would really want to be getting to from the Sixers if Tobias Harris is out? Would there be a standout value option?
I don't really think so. Like, if they started Korkmaz, then maybe at 3,200. The issue is that Danuel House is 3,100, but he's not a very good point per minute guy. And my assumption is you're kind of going to get those minutes like spread around. Korkmaz is 3,200. He's just a little bit better fantasy option. Niang, I wouldn't expect to start anyway, but even if he played more minutes, he's up to 4,700 already. So it's really tough to get there. So I think it'll probably be tough one way or the other. For me, I'm interested in Embiid, but again, he's priced up. You do just get tons and tons of usage without Maxey out there. And so that's somewhat interesting, but still, expensive, still kind of tough to get to. And then Shake Milton playing a ton of minutes, but his price tags come up as well.
And then on the other side of the game for the Grizzlies, there's not really anything I like too much from this part of the game. So we've got Desmond Bane is still out, but Moran is priced up. Jaren Jackson Jr. has become more expensive. Dylan Brooks, he's $6,500 across DraftKings and FanDuel. If I was to get to a line with Moran or Brooks or say here or there or Triple J, I'd be okay with it. But there's nothing here that I'm really dying to get to. And there's always the risk with Jaren Jackson Jr., especially in a matchup where Joel Embiid is in the opposing front court, to foul trouble. That's always been something that's been an issue with him in the past. So I don't really think anybody projects particularly well here from a points per dollar standpoint.
I'm still interested in Morant. He was really disappointing last game, but he's played 6 games now where Bane is out and Jackson is in. He's averaged 1.55 DraftKings points per minute, 35.6% usage rate, 44.5% assist percentage. He's averaged 33.2 minutes per game, but in competitive games, you're typically getting like 34, 35 minutes from him, which is up from where he was earlier in the year. So I do think amongst the pay up options we've talked about so far, I think I prefer Morant. In this situation, he's just averaging more fantasy points per minute than Tatum. He's averaging more than Durant. He's averaging basically the same as Jokic, but he's 10-8 and he's a guard instead of a center. So you have an extra spot you can roster him at. At 2% ownership, I think he's really interesting. Jackson, 7K, 2% ownership, is fine. But I do like getting to Morant here still. Steven Adams at 5,300. I never mind going there. Should play around 30 minutes. Obviously a good rebounder. But to me, Morant's the most interesting guy in tournaments.
Yeah, I agree. If I had to roster one guy, it would be Morant. Ultimately, though, I just don't think I'm going to get to him very often. I don't think I'm going to get to a whole lot of pay up options at a crazy amount on this slate, unless something was to really change with the value scenarios. At least this morning when I was running lineups, I didn't really get to very many pay up guys. Anything else you want to mention for Memphis?
Nope.
All right, so let's move on then. The next game is the New Orleans Pelicans against the San Antonio Spurs, and this is a game that potentially has a lot of moving parts, particularly on the Spurs side. But starting by talking about San Antonio, there's no Brandon Ingram, there's no Herb Jones, but we've got CJ McCollum returning. He was in health and safety protocols, and I assume he was actually sick because the fact that he wasn't able to play last game, even though he was out of the COVID protocols for conditioning reasons. So that makes me think that he actually was sick. We saw Zion Williamson put up some pretty big fantasy games in his absence. It's a good matchup today against the Spurs. Even with McCollum back, I still like getting to Zion tonight.
Yeah, so do I. I think it's a downgrade for Zion just because McCollum obviously is going to have the ball in his hands more. He's going to play make more. He's going to have a high usage rate, but Zion's still going to look good. You still don't have Ingram, so there is still some usage to go around. So I'm with you. Still happy getting to Zion, but just not as excited to get to him as I was when McCollum was also out.
And then as for the other players on the team, it's hard to get to the guys like Jose Alvarado and some of the other role players because McCollum's back. That basically takes away any of the value they had before. But is there any remaining value on any of these other role players for the Pelicans?
Not that really stands out. Trey Murphy's 5,700. He's getting some ownership with Herb Jones out and Ingram out. So the minutes should be there for him. He's a productive enough player. If he plays low to mid 30s, he's going to project pretty well. He's another guy that I think as better value opens up, his ownership probably comes down, but he's probably the easiest guy to get to here. If you take some shots on McCollum without Ingram at 7,600, I think that's okay. He's only played 2 games without Ingram and with Zion. He has a 28.6% usage rate, 23% assist percentage, 1.2 DraftKings points per minute. So small sample, but all those numbers are pretty much in line with what I would expect to see from him.
And now on the Spurs side of the game, this is where the injuries get to be a little lengthy. I think right now this is a team we should be looking at in the Spurs because Jakob Poeltl is out. We've got Jeremy Sochan out. Both of them are going to be out for multiple games. Josh Richardson is doubtful. Doug McDermott is doubtful. So individually, Poeltl's significant for this team. The other players individually don't necessarily play massive roles. But now we've got a team where there are some cheap options and the rotation has to be condensed. Zach Collins didn't play massive minutes last game, but is still priced pretty reasonably. What do you make of Zach Collins as a potential value play tonight?
I think he projects well. The issue with Collins is that the opportunity cost at center is so high. This is why I thought he was kind of a mistake at his ownership last slate. He projected really well, and I thought he was a good play if you just sort of look at that. But you don't have a lot of margin for error, and points per dollar doesn't necessarily get it done here. Zach Collins is 4,900. If he scores 30 DraftKings points, most people are going to be like, oh, cool, he's 6 stacks, great play. But you're using a center spot on him, and that's a spot where you're just going to get a lot of guys or, a decent number of guys that just go for 40, 50, 60 DraftKings points. So even if it's a slightly better point per dollar multiplier, if you don't end up making up for that at other positions, you're just losing actual points. So That's my concern. 25% ownership. I get it. He projects well. He's a good fantasy producer. He played 27 minutes last game, potentially could have played more. But I also, at that ownership, I don't know, I kind of just like the idea of restructuring your lineups to where maybe you're getting more expensive centers and you're paying down at, the wing spots or something like that. And then if Zach Collins does go for 25, 26 DraftKings points, you're just in a really, really good situation. And then the other thing, I mentioned it the other day, and we didn't really see it play out. Keldon Johnson, I think, got like 7 rebounds or something. But Zach Collins does take a pretty big hit in terms of production when he plays alongside Keldon Johnson. We've seen Keldon Johnson, his rebounding rate go up and Collins come down. So I think that's a little bit concerning as well. With Keldon Johnson on the floor this year, 1 DraftKings point per minute for Collins, 11.6% rebounding percentage. Without Keldon Johnson on the floor, Collins has a 17.4% rebounding percentage and 1.28 DraftKings points per minute. So I do think that's a little bit concerning.
And then as for the other players on the team, and also something else with Zach Collins, it's hard for me at this point to project him to play, a massive amount of minutes, because the last game, even with Pirtle out, it's not like he all of a sudden just plays all of a sudden. He played 27 minutes last game. There was a little bit of foul trouble, but it doesn't seem like he's somebody who's going to go out and play 32 to 34 minutes. There's still going to be Isaiah Roby playing center minutes. Alize Johnson could be in the mix. There's different players that they're willing to give minutes to. As for the other players on the Spurs, Keldon Johnson, Vassell, Trey Jones, is anybody else standing out to you as a decent guy to get to?
There's a lot of ownership coming in here. Keldon Johnson at 7,200. I sort of just mentioned it with Collins, but so far you've gotten a bump for Johnson when Collins is on the floor. So, and it's not just the fact that Pirtle isn't, because if you just look at Johnson's rates without Pirtle, they come up a little bit. But when you put Collins on specifically, Keldon Johnson just rebounds a lot better, 13.5% rebounding percentage, 1.12 DraftKings points per minute in 106 minutes alongside Collins so far this year. And that 1.12 DraftKings points per minute is on 43.5% true shooting as well. So he has shot like shit and still been really, really productive. So certainly interested in Johnson, but also not really sure he should be pulling 20% ownership. We have him with a 9% chance of being optimal. So, I think he's a good play, but probably going a bit over-owned. Same can be said for Keita Bates-Diop, 3,900. He's a guy that I've won some money with this year. I like playing him when he starts. But because of the lack of value right now, he's pulling 24% ownership. We have him with an 11% chance of being optimal. This is somebody that averages 0.82 DraftKings points per minute. He's likely to give you around 28 minutes. Not exactly the kind of guy that I like playing at, when 1/4 of the field is rostering him.
Yeah, so just to read some of the early ownership projections we have here. Keldon Johnson, starting with FanDuel, he's projected for 27% ownership. Bates-Diop, 23%. Vassell, 20%. Zach Collins, 18%. That's on FanDuel. And then on DraftKings, like half of the most popular players come from the Spurs. Collins, 25%. Bates-Diop, 24%. Keldon Johnson, 20%. Isaiah Roby, 19%. So this is going to be a very popular team. I understand why people are getting to them. I think individually, though, almost all of them are a little bit too popular.
Yeah, that's how I see it as well. Probably guys that if you're playing cash games, you're going to be getting to a lot, at least with the way things look right now. But tournaments, it's more, again, they're good plays, but I don't view any of these guys as the type of chalk where it's just like, yeah, okay, I'm just jamming them in everywhere. I don't know how they fail. There's not alternatives that I want to get to. Here, it's just, I think these guys are more the type of chalk where they're popular because they project slightly better than the alternatives, but there are plenty of alternatives.
The next game we have here is the Indiana Pacers against the Utah Jazz. But before we talk about this, just want to shout out to Prize Picks, who are the sponsor of today's show. And there's a number of ways that you guys can get access to the tools we have over at Stokastic for really cheap. First, we have our 3-day free trial where if you're a new customer, haven't used the site yet, 3 days for free. Free trial period. You check out all our player projections, ownership projections, boom bust tool, everything we have behind the paywall for basically every single sport out there. But also, if you guys don't have a Prize Picks account and you sign up by clicking on our link, you get 1 free month of a Stokastic Plus Platinum package. And in addition, you are also going to get up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit at Prize Picks. So a lot of value there. $100 for free from Prize Picks and 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum. And we have all the tools that you're going to need on our site to build winning player prop cards at Prize Picks. We've got projections on all the different player props, projected odds, and them to go over or under those numbers. So no-brainer offer if you've been looking to get involved in Prize Picks, or if you just want to get involved in sports betting. You don't have legal sports betting in your state. there's a good chance that PrizePicks does operate and you could play on props there. Just click on our link when you sign up. So the next game here, the Indiana Pacers against the Utah Jazz. Potential big injury here. Tyrese Halliburton is questionable. He is playing just absurdly well for the Pacers. His assist rate this year is right around 50%, and he's maintaining a low turnover rate. He had a turnover last game for the first time in about a week. So we've got a guy in Halliburton, 50+% assist rate. Turnover rate is right around 14%. Crazy stuff as far as playmaking is concerned. How do the Pacers fill this role if he isn't able to play?
TJ McConnell, I guess.
And how many minutes do you think McConnell could realistically play? Are we going to see him play 36, 34 minutes in this spot if he was to start?
We've seen him, going from memory, we've seen him step up and play like huge minutes in the past when he started. I'm double checking that now, but I'm pretty sure. And we had seen his, in some individual games recently, him play a lot. So I think he could step up and play sizable minutes. He started 11 games since the start of the 2020-2021 season. He's averaged 34.9 minutes per game with 0.93 DraftKings points per minute.
Yeah, and I mean, McConnell, I think pretty clearly would be the best value play on the slate if Tyrese Halliburton wasn't to play. I'd be loading up on McConnell. That could be close to a lock play for me if there is no Halliburton. Who would be the other players that benefit from the Pacers?
I mean, you should see probably more minutes from Mathurin. Like, I think they would just want him on the floor more. Obviously, he's a good fantasy point per minute guy. Buddy Hield could see some increased usage. The thing with somebody like Halliburton, though, is it's kind of difficult because you can say like, TJ McConnell is a lower usage guy than Halliburton, so there's more usage to go around. But Halliburton is such a good playmaker. Are you getting the same quality of shots that you would? Like, is your efficiency going to suffer because Halliburton's not out there? And I think that's a very real risk. Granted, McConnell's he's a solid point guard. He can make plays, but he's not Tyrese Halliburton. So, I think you do want to be careful saying like, okay, well, there's more usage for Buddy Hield, but if Buddy Hield's getting less open looks, then it's going to kind of even out, and you're probably going to see something more in line with just what you normally get.
And then if Halliburton does play, would there be any standout players from the Pacers, whether it's himself or anybody else?
I don't really think so. I still sort of like the $7,300 price tag on Miles Turner. We've been getting sizable minutes from him when he's able to avoid foul trouble. Last game, he only played 28 minutes, but that was a game that blew out. Indiana didn't have their starters on the floor at the end of the game, but you're getting 32 plus typically in competitive games where he's not in foul trouble. He is a good fantasy point per minute guy. He's been around 1.2 DraftKings points per minute this year. So he's another center where I think he's just going a little bit under-owned at 8%. I realize that they're different price points, but I like the idea of just trying to like build tournament lineups where if everybody's going to pay down at center for Zach Collins, I go to the mid range and I grab Miles Turner, or I grab Clint Capella or whoever, and hope these guys go for 40, 45 DraftKings points, beat Collins by 15 to 20, and give me a leg up. So I like Turner. Jalen Smith's always kind of appealing at that salary just because there is so much volatility for him. He averages 24 to 25 minutes per game, but you're really going to get anywhere from 18 to 30 in any given game. But he is about a fantasy point per minute guy. So whenever he's low owned, I like going to Jalen Smith. Whenever he is not low owned, I don't like going to Jalen Smith. He did get hurt last game, but he's not on the injury report today, so I expect him to play.
Yeah, and also a massive total in this game, 238 points, expected to be pretty high scoring. On the Jazz side of the game, there's a lot of ownership going here. Some guys that are a little bit priced down. It's also a pretty favorable situation against the Pacers. Mentioned how high the total is. But for the Utah Jazz, if you look over on DraftKings, we have Colin Sexton is the single most popular projected player right now. Jordan Clarkson projected for the fourth most ownership. Then over on FanDuel, Sexton projected to be the most popular player, 42% ownership for Sexton on FanDuel right now. And then Clarkson at $6,600. Projected for 35% ownership. The main reason there, Mike Conley remains out for this team. Return is nearing, but at least for now, isn't going to be in the mix. What do you make of all of the value and the ownership going to the Utah Jazz backcourt?
I think it makes sense because there's two things here. One, you get, for somebody like Sexton, you have him just playing a different role than when Conley was out. But the other thing, and I don't know if this is just because of Conley or if it's just coincidental timing, I think it's probably mostly just a coincidence. Utah's been playing their starters a lot more minutes than they were earlier in the year. The big issue with Utah for a lot of the season has been they have good point per minute guys, but you had like Lauri Markkanen leading the way with 33 or 34 minutes per game. And then Conley was playing 30, Clarkson's playing 30, Olynyk's playing 27, Vanderbilt's playing 24. Since Conley's been out, over that time period, Vanderbilt's still playing 24-25. And I expect that to continue because, one, he fouls a lot. And then two, anytime they're in competitive games or playing from behind, they typically are going to go with Malik Beasley because Jared Vanderbilt is not an offensive thing. So I still expect to, see that 24-25 minutes from Vandy, but you're getting so much more playing time from everybody else. Lauri Markkanen's playing like 36, 37 minutes per game. Jordan Clarkson's playing 36 plus. He played 40 last game, wasn't even on the floor for the last 2 minutes of the game because of a blowout. Olynyk has averaged like 33 minutes per game in the games without Conley. He played 36 last game. So you're just getting so much more playing time for these guys that it makes everybody look better. If you were getting normal minutes and it was just Mike Conley's out, Sexton would really be the only guy that I think benefits, because it's not like Conley's a massive usage guy or anything like that. It would just be Sexton stepping into those minutes. But with everybody getting more minutes and these price tags not really adjusting, Sexton's averaging 31 minutes per game just about as a starter, 0.96 DraftKings points per minute, only 5,500 on DraftKings. 7,100 for Clarkson if he's going to play 37 or 38 minutes is going to look good. Same for Olynyk if he's going to play 33 minutes at 5,800. Markkanen just shy of 8K, but playing 36 minutes is going to look solid. So there's a lot to like from this Utah team.
Yeah, and that's certainly what the field is doing by going to them in a pretty big way. Lauri Markkanen, I'm kind of surprised his price has come down as much as it has, and the fact that it's $7,900, 13% ownership on DraftKings, I think that's pretty moderate. So Markkanen, I think not necessarily direct kind of pivot or leverage type play, but I do think that if you're playing more Markkanen as opposed to somebody like a Jordan Clarkson, if Markkanen has a big game shooting the basketball, that's probably shots that come away from Clarkson. So there's a lot of guys to like here, and I understand why the field is getting there. Are there any low-owned players you like from Utah?
Not particularly. I think everybody relevant is getting at least 10% ownership on DraftKings. If for whatever reason we're playing a game where I have to play a low-owned Utah guy, 3K Alexander Walker was ahead of Talen Horton-Tucker in the rotation last game. So that's pretty interesting. Fontecchio played. Talen Horton-Tucker didn't play at all. But Alexander Walker subbed in the same time as Beasley. He closed the first half. Then Alexander Walker didn't play at all in the second half. So I don't really know what to make of that rotation. Fontecchio didn't play either. They just played a super condensed rotation. So again, I'm not interested in any of these guys, but if one of them happened to have a good game, my guess would be Alexander Walker.
So let's move on to the Houston Rockets against the Phoenix Suns. And we've talked about Jalen Green, the improvements he's made in playmaking. He's a guy who's not quite as scoring dependent as he was earlier in the year. I just hate this matchup against the Suns. It is a really widespread 11.5 points. Also just a tough spot to really generate offense going up against Phoenix. Then we've also guys like Kevin Porter, Jalen Green, a little bit more expensive than they were before. It's going to be tough for me to want to get to Houston, guys.
Yeah, agreed. You and I talked the other day about Jalen Green's assist percentage finally coming up. He's playing really, really well and all of that. But it's still just pretty much tournament options for me here. Tough spot at Phoenix. They're 12-point dogs. The price tag on Green is appealing. He's only getting 2% ownership. He's 7,300. If this game's competitive, you're likely getting 36 plus minutes. And if this game's competitive, some combination of Jalen Green, Kevin Porter, and Sengun have to be playing well, because I don't know how else the game is competitive. But outside of tournament considerations, I don't see much here. So it's just sort of, if you land on some Sengun, Porter, Green, that's always going to be fine, but not spots that I'm looking to prioritize.
So let's talk about the Phoenix Suns, where Devin Booker is just smashing everybody as of late. Chris Paul remains out, and I'm sure part of the reason that the Suns feel comfortable letting Chris Paul get back to 100% is because they just keep winning games without him, because Devin Booker has really elevated himself to being one of the better players we have in the NBA, and it's translated to massive DFS games. So Devin Booker has started to become a little bit more expensive, but he's got a great matchup today against the Houston Rockets. Do you still want to pay up for him?
Sure, if you can get there. I think that, he does get a bump without Chris Paul. That goes without saying. He's $10,100, getting 5% ownership. He's not going to come through all that often. It's just that when he does, he basically just wins you tournaments. 11 games now without Chris Paul, 1.43 DraftKings points per minute, 37 minutes per game, 31.5% usage rate, 27% assist percentage. All of that looks really, really good. Clearly going to be happy to get to him. I do think that with him being like $700 less than John Morant, that's one reason why, there's a lot of reasons, but one reason why Morant's ownership is so low and why it is going to, in practice, be difficult to get there, even if I want to. You can just get Devin Booker for less. So yeah, I like Devin Booker, but again, he is expensive.
Yeah, and then somebody who's become less expensive, Cameron Payne. his price has come down on FanDuel and DraftKings as a result. He's 21% owned on DK. FanDuel campaign, his salary's come all the way down to 6,000. He's projected for 39% ownership. Campaign obviously still benefiting from the absence of Chris Paul. Love the matchup. I don't really understand why the price point has come down. Campaign is one of the most popular players on the slate. Do you agree with the ownership?
Yes and no. It's like the Spurs guys. I agree that he projects as one of the best point per dollar guys at 6,400. I don't agree that he should just be getting, 5 to 10 times the ownership of a bunch of other guards that are within like $1,000 of his salary. But I think he's a good play. I just think he's going a little bit overowned. In the 11 games he's played without Paul, 1.03 DraftKings points per minute, 31.4 minutes per game. I think he's a little bit underpriced here. I like getting to him. I just also think that there are some spots, amongst the mid-range guards where you can pivot away from a really popular pain and still get a really good play.
And is there anybody else from Phoenix that you want to highlight here?
DeAndre Ayton's really, really, really good. He's another mid-range center that's just not getting much ownership right now because you have the field using Zach Collins so often at that position. I like the idea of getting to some Ayton. He's playing big minutes in competitive games, played 31 and a half last game, lost about a minute and a half to garbage time. Obviously, no guarantee this game's going to be competitive, but on average, you're getting 31, 32 minutes of a really productive player. So I like Ayton in tournaments. Bridges is playing a ton. If you get there, that's fine. But I think it's pretty much Payne, Booker, Ayton for me.
Final game on the slate, the Chicago Bulls against the Golden State Warriors. Now, from the Bulls, you and I have had this discussion numerous times about them, the likes of the Wizards and teams where it's just like, hey, a lot of good quality fantasy players, when they're all healthy, they kind of cut into each other's usage, and it's really hard to make any of them priorities. So DeRozan, Levine, Vooch, tough matchup on the road against the Warriors. Well, maybe shouldn't actually say tough matchup because the Warriors have a good real life defense, but they play at such a fast pace that it kind of offsets a lot of the defensive issues that teams might run into going up against them. But DeRozan, Levine, Vooch, it's hard for me to prioritize any of them with all of them active.
Yeah, same here. Levine is getting 15% ownership on DraftKings at 7,200. It's another one of those spots. I get it. Levine looks good. He's a point per minute guy. He's going to play 34, 35 minutes. What is the big difference between Zach LaVine and Jamal Murray? Like, why is one 15% owned and one is 3% owned? I don't really get that. And so that's sort of the issue that I'm running into. But clearly, if you're going to get to Levine, it's a very, very, very fast-paced Golden State team. Happy to get there. Happy to get to some $7,300 Vooch, throw him into that mid-range center group of guys that just aren't getting ownership. But I think Levine's the one that probably stands out the most here. Vooch, 7,300 looks pretty good. Andre Drummond's projected for 12% ownership. I get it. He's 3,500. He's a really good point per minute guy. If he plays all of the backup center minutes, he's going to project pretty well. Not positive he's playing all of the minutes here. And my concern is because of what we saw against Oklahoma City a couple of games ago. They went with Derek Jones Jr. as the backup center in the second half against that small Oklahoma City team. I wouldn't be surprised if against a Draymond Green-led second unit with Golden State, if they go with some Derek Jones Jr. and you don't get those full backup minutes from Andre Drummond.
Yeah, I mean, center minutes that are being played by the Warriors, it's Looney, it is Draymond Green and JaMychal Green now that they don't have James Wiseman in the mix. So yeah, this is a relatively small team the Warriors put out there, and that is a good point that you're making. I wouldn't be surprised either if it's not Andre Drummond playing the backup center minutes. And now from the Warriors side of the game, we've seen this starting unit is ridiculously good, and then everything kind of goes to shit for the Warriors when the starters come out of the game. And the way that they've counteracted that is Steph Curry is playing bigger minutes in regular seasons than we've seen in some previous years. So I've been playing Curry more in DFS than I've really ever played him in other years. And it's not just the minutes. The peripherals are ridiculous for him as well. This is one of the best offensive seasons we've ever seen from Steph Curry. And we're looking at some games now where we're seeing him. He's averaging 7 rebounds and 7 assists per game. We know the threes are there. He adds some defensive stats. He's just a better fantasy player than he's been in previous years, which you wouldn't expect at his age.
Yeah, he's averaging 1.55 DraftKings points per minute this year, which, to put that in context, it's exactly what John Morant's averaging in the games he plays without Desmond Bane. It's in line with, what guys like Jokic do that are even more expensive. So Curry's another one of these pay-up guards where I really like the idea of getting there. It's just that right now it's tough to do it because, one, you don't have a lot of value elsewhere. And then, two, you do have a lot of strong mid-range guard plays where they kind of drive up the opportunity cost. So I think as value opens up, it's going to be easier to get to Steph. But with the way things look right now, it's more of I would love to get to him. I don't know how much I can, just like John Morant, just like Devin Booker. But he has been exceptional this year. Like you said, playing big minutes, but also rebounding at a higher rate. 10.7% rebounding percentage this year, 29% assist percentage. He just looks really, really good. After that, it's just sort of secondary plays for me. Any Wiggins, Green, Thompson that you get to is going to be fine, but none of them stand out as guys that you're building around.
All right, that is going to do it for us today, guys. If you haven't done yet, do us a big favor, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel right after us. On the Contraries coming up, and then later on the day, we got the NBA Deeper Dive, NBA Live Before Lock. So check out all the content we have. I hope to see you guys later. Good luck today.